Folks, welcome to today's Analytics Breakthrough webinar. We have a very special guest today, John Mesh, who is the product manager from Google Optimize. We've had a chance to be in contact with John over the past maybe close to 2 years at this point. So we're very happy to have him on the webinar today to share with us some perspectives and special takeaways regarding Google Optimize. Your moderators from Enor for the webinar will be Tara Dunn, who's Analytics Optimization Architect at Enor, and myself, Eric Fettman, co-author of Google Analytics Breakthrough and trainer and coach at Enor. And our special guest is John Mesh, as mentioned, product manager for Google Optimize. So hello, John. Hello, Tara. Glad to have both of you on the webinar today.
Great. Thanks so much, Eric. It's great to be here.
Okay.
Thanks, Eric.
And just as a general outline, well, before we get to the outline, if you have any questions, please make sure to enter them into the questions panel in GoToWebinar. Tara and I will make sure to moderate the questions and to bring them to John's attention. And the high-level outline for today will be why Optimize. There are other tools in the space, so why do you want to choose Optimize? And why might you want to go from Optimize, the unpaid version, to Optimize 360? What's the value proposition of Optimize 360? And then John is going to share some special insights and successes with us. So with that, John, why Optimize?
Sure, thanks, Eric. Well, it's a great question. You know, we're at Google, we've kind of realized for a long time the value in the space. So we might have, some of you might even remember from back in the day, we had tools like Google Website Optimizer, or content experiments within Google Analytics. And these tools were, you know, really well used and had a lot of great success. But we also saw that the industry changed a lot, and we saw a lot of the needs shifting, and the technology really moved to the point where a lot more people could run testing. And also just there was a cultural awareness about A/B testing and about personalization that we wanted to really help drive and help kind of our customers make the most of. And so where we saw, you know, the kind of the phrase big data being the kind of the keywords and the buzzwords of the early 2010s, really it's moving much more in the direction of machine learning and personalization now. And we wanted to help people kind of move from that area of just having the data to actually doing something with it. So that's a lot of why we built Optimize, is really to help people make that shift. But when we started looking into this, some of the first things that we discovered were that people really didn't like having multiple sources of truth. I'm sure any of you who have spent much time looking at, you know, numerous sources of data, you probably spent more time than you care to recall deduplicating data, trying to reconcile data, trying to get it all to match up. And so that was one of the first decisions that we made with Optimize, was we said that we don't want to have a totally separate data source. So one of the nice things about Optimize is all of that data is from Google Analytics natively. And the great thing about that is it comes in and really into account in 3 different ways. So the first is that when you run a test or a personalized experience with Optimize, you get to use those metrics and goals that come from Google Analytics for your tests. So you don't have to go set all those up again. You don't have to re-instrument anything. It's just kind of all there once you link, which is a very simple process. So that's kind of the first part. The second part is that when you run that test, that data goes straight back in to Google Analytics. Again, there is no separate optimized data, measurement data. It's all just Google Analytics data. So the great thing about that is that once you run that test and you kind of say, you know, I've got these main 3 things that I want to watch, you can watch those really simply and easily in Optimize. But if you want to go back and dive more deeply, that's where you can go into Google Analytics, and it all just shows up in a couple of extra dimensions that show up in your custom reporting, in your regular reporting and segmentation, and you can do a lot more powerful things there with that test data. Also, if you're on the Analytics 360 product, that's where we have our BigQuery export functionality, and optimized data, the experiment data, just comes out via that export as well. So that's one of the main things that we wanted to strive for with Optimize, is to make that measurement of those tests really, really simple. But there's also another part of that, and that's where setting up those tests can be complex as well. And so we made a really, really powerful visual editor that lets you do both really simple changes really easily. So if you want to just try a different headline on your page or change the size of something or some simple styling, that's very easy. But it also goes all the way towards having much more dynamic, powerful code-oriented functionality. So you can do things like edit raw HTML, edit CSS, you can run JavaScript, and you can run this on dynamic web apps as well. And by the way, you can also look at what all those things look like on like a mobile device, for example, to see exactly what that would, how that would appear when you run your test. So that's a summary of why Optimize. And I mentioned 2 of the integrations for Google Analytics, but the third one is in Optimize 360. So I'll stop there for a moment, Eric, because I wanted to make sure you had a moment to comment.
Yeah, that's all very very interesting. And actually the BigQuery, I don't know if we had necessarily even considered the BigQuery export of the optimized dimensions as part of the integration. So that's a particularly interesting point, because any type of more multi-session or hit level analysis that you would normally do in BigQuery rather than in GA, you'd get the benefit of the optimized dimensions in BigQuery with the export as well. So that's an interesting point that I don't know I don't think I had considered it before. So that was I was interested to hear that in particular.
Yeah, and that's that's a place where one of the things that we've realized with optimization, with testing, with personalization, is people start from all different places, and we see some customers who have maybe heard of an A/B test before, and they're not really sure even what all is involved, all the way to the other end of the spectrum where people are wanting to measure numerous downstream effects on offline data, joining with CRM data, doing their own kind of stats calculations, etc. So we really wanted to try to address the spectrum of that as effectively as we could. That's one of the benefits of having both like a really simple interface with Optimize, but again, it goes all the way out to BigQuery. So if you've got some data scientists on your team, that's the place to be.
Right, and I think all organizations understand the importance of testing and active optimization at this point. Where they're at in that progression is kind of all over the map. So it is good that Optimize can accommodate the the next level of insight regardless of where you're coming to optimize from.
One thing just to call out, you mentioned earlier being able to test on dynamic pages. I wanted to just give a little high five on activation events. I think that's an awesome feature of Optimize. And I think I see clients kind of underutilize it until they come to us and say, hey, we've got a dynamic site and we want to try to test it better. And then it's great to have that feature in our pocket to come to them and say, try activation events, So I just thought I'd mention that for anyone listening to the webinar who maybe hasn't heard of it yet, to go give them a try. They're great.
Yeah, when we tried to make those so it was really kind of easy to set up on your site just the one time, and then after that you could just kind of create your test in the way that you wanted to. So it basically lets you kind of say, this is exactly where my users are in maybe a particular JavaScript or Ajax flow, and then you can really easily target your tests to those events. Yeah.
So, John, why Optimize 360?
Sure. That's a great question. So maybe first I'll just say a little bit about the philosophy that we wanted to take with Optimize and Optimize 360. We at Google, of course, for many, many years, we always like to help users get the benefit of our tools for free. And so Optimize itself is completely free. And Optimize 360 is our paid version. So when it came to trying to decide what things to put in which version of the products, one of our philosophies is that we wanted to make sure that everyone could get started and use a lot of the power and functionality of Optimize for free. And so what you'll find when you go into the Optimize interface is almost everything there is lit up by default. And that means that you can do like JavaScript targeting, custom JavaScript, you can use geographies, you can run tests with different kinds of weighting, etc. And there's also a lot of reporting flexibility as well. Now, where some of the limits come in is that we basically wanted to help people get to that steady state with testing. We didn't want to ever block someone from getting started and getting to a really good steady state with their testing efforts and their personalization efforts. So that's what Optimize is for. So you can run up to 3 concurrent tests. You can run some pretty powerful A/B and multivariate tests. You can use those activation events on dynamic web pages. And again, all this data comes back into Google Analytics. There's a lot of power there and flexibility as well. But what we wanted to do with Optimize 360 is make that for people who are more advanced in their testing needs, and we're kind of moving along that curve in terms of their sophistication. So some of the stuff that comes with Optimize 360. So first of all, as you probably expect from the majority of the analytics suite, there's dedicated sales and service. Of course, Enor is one of our great partners in these efforts, and they can really help you make the most of that tool. There's also an SLA that comes along with that to make sure that you feel like you have the guarantees that you need. But on the feature side, there's a few notable things that I want to call out. Number one, we let you run a whole lot more tests. So if you want to run 100 tests on your site and you're sophisticated enough to know how to do that well, awesome, we can help you do that. One of the other features that we are probably most excited about with Optimize 360 is actually the third integration with Google Analytics. So I mentioned the first 2 already. So one, again, you get to use those metrics that come over from Google Analytics in your tests in Optimize. 2, the data goes back into Google Analytics. And the third one is what's in Optimize 360, and that is the integration with Google Analytics audiences. Now, if any of you have used remarketing in Google Analytics, you know that you can use some of that behavioral data that comes from analytics and then retarget users when they're off of your site with remarketing. Well, in the same way, what we can do is we can take those kinds of audiences and use those back when users come to your site again. And this is really powerful when you have things like cart abandoners, or you have users with really particular interests that you want to help find the right product for more quickly. You want to make sure that they see that more quickly. So what that does, you take a segment, you turn that into an audience in Google Analytics, and then you could serve that back on the very first hit when they come back to your site. So that's one of our favorite capabilities of Optimize 360. There's also more reporting flexibility as well. So in Optimize Free, you can choose up to 3 objectives that you care about, and then all the rest does show up in Google Analytics, so there's still a lot of flexibility there. But in Optimize 360, you can pre-select up to 10, but then even after you run your test, you can go back and look at all of your goals and a bunch of other metrics that are just processed for you by default. And for those of you who have been doing testing for a long time, I'm sure you are probably aware of the fact that not every test is a winner. You know, oftentimes people find results like 1 or 2 in 10 of their tests is really, really a solid winner for them. And so the question becomes, how do you get the most value out of the rest of those tests? And what we find is that people who have a test that maybe didn't generate a winner often want to go back and look at more metrics, try to figure out if something else changed. They want to look more deeply into their data. And so that's where, the ability to look at those other metrics with Optimize and with Google Analytics and those segments in Google Analytics is really, really powerful.
So John, you're saying even if you don't pre-select one goal or multiple goals as the objectives of your test with Optimize 360, you could still evaluate your whatever variations you have against any goal and e-commerce metrics as well?
Yeah, so in Optimize 360, we by default, even if you didn't select them, we process all of your goals, and we also process some of your key metrics. So you'll see things like e-commerce, you'll see transactions, you'll see page views. I think there's a few others in there as well. I don't recall the full list off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah, we wanted to make it really easy to go back and look at the broader effects of your test after the fact.
Okay, that's very interesting because you could have a winner in your main objective, and it could be a loser in all of your other important metrics and conversions, and the converse could be true as well.
Yeah, exactly. And we've heard cases like that before. This is actually a not uncommon case where you might be trying to optimize for one particular thing. Maybe it's a click on a particular button or something like that. But for some reason, some other objective that you care about, maybe it's transactions down the line, are affected. I heard a really interesting case from a partner of ours where they worked with a major electronics retailer. And that electronics retailer had this giant autoplay video on the background of their website. And they kind of had the question of, you know, if we don't autoplay this video, is that video distracting? Is that causing people to bounce off of our site?
Okay.
So they ran a test to see what would happen if they turned off the autoplay functionality.
I'm very interested because as a basic tenet of usability is not to just play things automatically,
right.
But sometimes we find out in testing that the tenets don't apply to us. So I'm interested to hear the result.
Yeah, what was fascinating about that one was that sure enough, when they turned off the autoplay, the bounce rate got better. It was improved. So, you know, that's kind of like, as you were saying, Eric, that's sort of like a usability thing. It seems like it makes sense, right? But what happened was the transactions actually dropped because that autoplay video was so inspiring on that first page that it caused people to get all the way through the funnel and actually purchase that particular, the camera in this particular case that was behind me.
So basically the people who were annoyed were never really serious to begin with. And
perhaps. Yeah. Of course, there's always all sorts of different hypotheses to continue testing with a situation like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like maybe those bounces just represented unqualified leads anyway.
Very well could have been. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
So, John, I think you had a few additional specific insights to share with us from your end, and a few screens to show.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to go ahead and make you presenter.
Sure. And while we're pulling that up, I see a question on here about personalization. I thought I would just address while we're kind of waiting. And the question is basically, I hear the word personalization quite frequently when talking about an A/B testing tool. Can you elaborate on that concept? And what's new with Optimize in terms of personalization? That's a really great question, and I do want to address that directly because I think any of you who are kind of using Optimize today know that it is a little bit more oriented toward A/B testing. And so I wanted to mention, for us on the Optimize team, we really believe that doing really great personalization starts with getting good at A/B testing. And the reason for that is it's very, very easy to kind of just drop a widget on your page or kind of flip a switch and start. Maybe there's some solutions out there that let you do some of that personalization, but the impact of that is going to be limited because, again, you don't really understand exactly what's happening. You're not learning more about your users. You're not necessarily gaining more insight from that. And a lot of times people actually don't even know the value of doing that personalization. Maybe they see a one-time uplift, but then they don't know what it's like over the long run. So for us, we're really trying to help people get successful at A/B testing, and you'll see us do more and more moving toward personalization as we go forward. So I encourage you to keep in touch and stay tuned there. So let me go ahead and pull up this screen here. Right. Eric, hopefully you can see my screen just fine?
I see it fine from my end, John.
Great. Yeah, so Eric and the eNOR team had asked me just to share a little bit about some of our success stories with Optimize, and I wanted to share just a few kind of select ones. If you're interested in any of these are available on our website as well. You can see some more details about these case studies. So the first one that I wanted to share, many of you might be familiar with Motley Fool. So they're a financial publisher, and they really try to get people to buy their membership. And so they have a lot of people where they're trying to get people through this newsletter order form. So for them, they ran a particular test of simplifying the experience. And they tried actually a lot of different things, but they eventually found that they had an increase of 26% increase in the order page conversion rate. But actually one of the things that was most interesting to me about Motley Fool was the reduction in time that it took them to deploy tests. For them, it used to be with their previous solution, they would take up to 2 days to do this. And this had a lot to do with the fact that they have a lot of really detailed analytics tracking. So to give an example, Motley Fool does a lot of server-side analytics tracking with Google Analytics to make sure that they're getting really, really accurate transaction data. And for a company like Motley Fool, when they really have invested a lot to make sure their data is accurate, and I'm sure all of you are aware of the importance of data accuracy, making sure that you know exactly what your data means. Trying to go back and re-instrument that in some other tool was prohibitively expensive and challenging for them because they really wanted a lot of teams to be able to run these tests. So the nice thing about Optimize for them was that they were able to use it on top of all of that work they'd already done with Google Analytics to make sure that they knew exactly what that data was. So for them, it really was a huge productivity saving that helped them move much more quickly. So that's one particular case.
Okay. John, do we know what the treatments were, what the variations were in that case?
You know, I don't know the exact one in this particular case. I know they tried a number of different things, but I don't know the exact one in this particular case. I think this next one, a couple of these next ones, I'll see if we can find some that are a little bit more dedicated though here. This one, actually, I don't have the particular variants shown here, but next this particular case I know for a fact was all about the text that they were using to promote this conference. So for them it was really simple. They had a little block in an article. It was really a subject line and then a couple of sentences and then a button. And they got this increase with a multivariate test of 26% just by changing text. Really very simple stuff. It wasn't hard at all. It was something that anyone can get started with really quickly. And that was really valuable for them. So again, it just goes to show you sometimes the simplest things still unlock really interesting value and great value there. Let me go into one more because I know this particular one I'm really familiar with the details of this one. AppMex is another customer of ours as well. If you're not familiar with AppMex, they are one of our, they're a very large online retailer of precious metals. And what they saw is that they have a lot of users coming to their site to check silver prices. And what they wanted to do was really try to promote their silver products to those users. And so they actually tried this as more of a personalized experience where when people came from those kinds of search terms or had looked at silver in the past, they specifically showed silver. So you can kind of see on the right here, they have the silver prices, but they also have these limited time offers, and they really focus on their silver product offerings, where before this page really didn't have any of those additional things there. And for them, they saw a 24% increase in their conversion rate. They saw a 9% increase in their new customer acquisition just from some simple stuff, right? These are things that all of us, it might seem intuitive at first, but I guarantee you most companies just have lots of these kinds of opportunities and don't always get the chance to try them as quickly as they'd like. And that's a lot of what we've tried to do with Optimize, is make it really simple to try ideas really quickly and understand the value quickly.
We can speak to this case study as well, and I can say that this client in particular, they really take advantage of the 360 higher level of simultaneous tests that you can run, because they have, they kind of participate in that fail fast mentality. They do a lot of quick iteration on their testing, and so for them that 360 feature is really important.
Yeah. Yep. I actually want to highlight one more kind of along that vein, Tara, and this is there's a company called Azimo. They're a financial services startup out of London, but what's fascinating to me about Azimo, they're good at remittances. They help people kind of send money around the world. And what was really fascinating to me about them is, despite being a startup, despite being very small, in the first 4 months of this calendar year alone, they ran 150 experiments. And I was pretty shocked by that, because that's more than one a day. And they're just, again, they're very similar to AppMex, as you mentioned, Tara, in that they're just able to really push these through really fast. And for them, one of the benefits of running so many of these is they do find really amazing winners. So this was one, Eric, to your question. I'm a little more familiar with this test as well. For them, they have a lot of different locales and a lot of different languages of people visiting, and they discovered through Google Analytics that their users in India were a little bit more price sensitive than others. And so for them, they really focused on value in their test presentations. So they did things like show pricing versus competitors and talked about people saving money, etc. And with that kind of focus, they were actually able to find 176% increase in user registrations through, I believe that particular one was showing a pricing comparison chart. Again, just some really fantastic value when you kind of stick with it and keep trying, finding all the different things that you might be able to generate value from.
And this was specifically conducted, the test was conducted on specifically the send money to India page.
I believe that's correct, yeah.
Okay, so it was kind of like segmentation through audience selection through navigation.
Yeah, yep. Yeah. So that's all the particular cases I wanted to share today. Obviously, we've got lots more of really great success stories, and we've got some more case studies that'll be coming out soon that we can share, but yeah.
Okay. Tara, did you have a couple of questions for John?
Sure. I mean, first of all, thank you. That was awesome. Really cool to hear about some of these other case studies. One of my questions was, what verticals do you think are really, what we see is there's a lot of verticals participating in testing and using Optimize, but I was wondering if there are any in particular that stood out, or just any interesting stories around vertical-specific test cases.
That's a great question. I think it really helps to have things that are easily measurable, and so I don't know that we have any particular verticals that are more successful than others, but certainly if a lot of what you're doing is trying to drive users to a physical store and you don't have a great way of kind of measuring that as a conversion, that may not be the easiest way to run an A/B test. So a lot of times what really matters is, can you measure steps along a funnel? Can you help people, even in that case, can you help people get to a phone number or get to like a contact form or something like that? So it's less about the specific vertical and more about, can you find what are the micro conversions that you want your users to complete and really help people kind of move through those steps of the funnel. Now, we definitely see a lot of e-commerce providers who are having some great success. I know there's an interesting case study we've got coming out soon about a bicycle company that was really trying to help personalize the homepage with a particular brand that a user was interested in. And obviously I've mentioned some publishing clients here, some e-commerce providers as well. So there's really a wide variety. I don't think we have any particular best ones. Again, Next Web is a publisher, so there's a pretty broad spectrum.
How would a publisher, John? How would a publisher use Optimize? Because I think we have a better understanding of how you measure optimization for anything that's more of a specific transaction. So, e-commerce or lead generation, something along those lines. But how would a publisher use Optimize?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. So I think Next Web was actually a great case of that, where some of the other tests that I know they ran were around their recommended content, for example. They would try things like styling their recommendation lists differently. They would try different numbers of recommendations. They would try different types of recommendations. So was it something that was trending now versus something that was sort of like top on their site over a certain period of time, or maybe more topically aligned. So things like that, and then you can measure those against, the session length, how many pages per session people actually spend on your site, Or, you know, if you're using AdSense, that metric is available directly in Optimize as something that you can run tests against. And so you can actually
Right.
see,
Okay.
right, so you can see the revenue per user, and if you adjust things, what's changing there.
Okay. So you do have a very concrete, you have very concrete metrics to measure against, in many cases, even in a publishing model.
Yeah, and again, in those types of cases too, most of these publishers, you'll have email newsletters, you'll have different ways of trying to get them to maybe share on social, all sorts of different kinds of engagements that a publisher might care about if you're trying to get them to subscribe to something premium. There's numerous opportunities.
Right.
I know we're just right there, but I wanted to squeeze in a quick comment. We've seen with our 360 publisher clients too that they're already making heavy utilization of the Analytics 360 feature of audiences. So like with the AdSense and double-click integration, being able to use those audiences effectively in their marketing, it translates really well to Optimize 360 and being able to segment those audiences. I think that for publishers in particular, that feature is really helpful. It's helpful for a lot of verticals, but we've seen some interesting cases for publishers.
Very nice.
That's right. Well, John, we are at the bottom of the hour, so we are going to conclude now. So thank you so much for sharing some special perspectives on Optimize. If the folks participating in the webinar, or if you're listening to the recording, if you want to learn more about Optimize, there are a number of things that John has indicated we could be on the lookout for, so make sure that you stay connected at google.com Analytics Optimize, and that you are early to know about the developments in the Optimize platform. So thank you, John, for joining us. Any parting thoughts for us?
If I had to pick just one, I will mention one thing I hadn't mentioned earlier, and that is to your point, Eric. One of the things that we announced not long ago is we're actually doing an integration with AdWords. So if any of you are doing testing on landing pages, and right now you might have to set up a lot of that coordination really manually, one of the things that we're working on right now, which will be rolling out in the coming months, is once Google Analytics is linked to AdWords and then Optimize is linked to Google Analytics, we can actually take the AdWords account, campaign, keyword, and ad group data, and that just shows up in Optimize. And so when somebody shows up on your page from one of those specific entities from AdWords, on that very first click, again, on that very first view of that page, we can actually customize that to match the intent of that particular AdWords campaign or creative or whatever it might be. So there's a lot of power that we're excited about unlocking for people who are doing that landing page optimization really soon.
Okay, that is exciting. That's exciting. Exciting update. We'll be on the lookout for that. And if folks have comments, we are going to be posting this the recording of this webinar on the eNOR blog. So if you do have any questions, you'll be able to ask those questions there, and we will do our best to respond to them. And again, stay connected more broadly with the Optimize updates at google.com Analytics Optimize. Thank you very much, John, for joining us. Tara, thank you for co-moderating, and thanks especially to our participants for joining. Best, and I don't like to say good luck, good energy and focus in everyone's optimization and analytics efforts going forward.
Thanks so much, Eric.
Thanks, John.
Thanks all.